grazing livestock and just grazing animals in general are a significant part of the planet. That really is the planet.
The average age of the farmer in America is 58 years old. That is not sustainable.
We've been hit with water curtailments. We've been hit with low prices by the conditions, by the rain, by the lamb crop, by the calf crop.
I heard a Native American gentleman say, wilderness, that's an invention of the white man, because we took care of this land.
Sometimes fighting doesn't mean shouting and screaming and pounding your fist. Sometimes it's just putting your boots on and being there for work the next day.
It is, are the American people fit to govern themselves, to rule themselves, to control themselves? I believe they are. My opponents do not. I believe in the right of the people.
There are cowboys still around. You just probably don't see them because we're working all the time.
I'm Keely Brazil Cavallo, and this is America on One.
This podcast is brought to you by Ranch Vision, the software ranchers use to boost profits and make better decisions.
All right, welcome back to Ranch Beat. I'm here with my dad, Dr. Rich Brazil, and my sister, Grace Brazil. So there's big news in the cattle industry this week. New World Screwworm is back in the United States across the border. We've been watching this for about 2 years. My dad, I've asked him to make several videos on this as it's made headlines in the ag world. Folks have been anticipating this happening for a while. It's finally here. Just figured we would jump on and talk about what New World Screwworm is, what this outbreak means for the industry. What are you looking for? What are treatment options? And stuff like that. Dr. Brazil is a large animal veterinarian of almost 40 years in Northern California. So thank you guys for joining me on short notice. Appreciate it.
Yeah,
thanks for having us.
You.
All right, so let's start with what is New World Screwworm. Dad, can you just talk about what it is? I imagine as a vet, there's a few things that they teach you as a vet student to look out for, and it's a 5-alarm fire if you ever see it. Is this one of those?
Yeah, we were taught in parasitology quite a bit about the differentiation between what's called the primary screwworm and the secondary screwworm. We deal with secondary screwworm all the time. That's your typical blowflies that, lay eggs, which become maggots in wounds. You see that a lot in sheep that aren't shorn. You can get urine scalding. The skin can get macerated. Blowflies, which typically their normal life cycle is going to dead tissue, dead animals or what have you, laying eggs. Those eggs become maggots. Those maggots eat on the dead animal. They pupate, then they become a fly, and they go do it all over again. But sometimes, when there's a wound on an animal, like you say, in sheep, it's common. Those flies can be attracted to that odor. They can lay their eggs, and maggots can get started there. So, as a veterinarian, that's something you see fairly frequently, maggots in sheep and cattle, and also dogs and cats and other animals. From that type of thing where you have a wound already, it's necrotic, it has an odor. It attracts these flies, they lay maggots, and then the maggots begin to feed on the tissue. So that's, what we typically see. But also there are what are called primary screwworms, and there's two types. There's an old world screwworm, which is in Africa and Southeast Asia, in India and places like that, which, we don't have here in the New World, right? The New World, which is North America, South America, Central America. But we have our own variant called the New World Screwworm. The New World Screwworm, it's called Cochleomya hominovorax, which means, hominovorax means man-eater. So this is a fly that does, it can infect people. But typically it doesn't, because usually we're aware enough. And if you have, maggots on you, you get them off, right? And you take care of that and you clean that out. But if people are incapacitated or little babies, that could be an issue. So it can cause this in people as well. But for our situation, we're looking at it in livestock. And the difference between primary screwworm, which we haven't had, and secondary screwworm, which we've always had, is that primary screwworm, they can initiate a wound in healthy living tissue. So they are more aggressive. They don't need a wound to get started. They like body openings, like, any bodily orifice, eyes, ears, nose, mouth, the navel. That's a common place for these wounds to get started in. The flies are attracted to those areas. They lay their eggs, their maggots then begin to burrow, and they are a more aggressive burrower. The secondary screwworm kind of feeds more on the surface, but the primary screwworm burrows down more and creates an enlarging wound, and it becomes more and more filled. And, that wound attracts more of these screwworms, and they lay more eggs, you get more maggots. And, this is often fatal in a couple weeks or so if it's not treated. So we got rid of it in North America in the 60s and 70s. I have pushed it all the way down below Panama, where it's been for several decades, and we haven't had to think about it. But we were taught about that.
I should have warned people not to be eating when they listen to this
I was
episode.
going to say you need a little PSA at the start. Talking about burrowing screwworms here.
Right. Yikes.
Anytime you talk to a vet, you better give that heads up.
Yeah, Grace and I are used to this.
Conversation. Yeah.
Dinner table.
The worst dinner conversations you can imagine in the Brazil house. Yeah, so on June 3rd, USDA's APHIS, I'm reading here, confirmed the first domestic detection, a New World screwworm in a 3-week-old calf in Zavala County, Texas, with larvae found in the umbilical area. Like Dr. Brazil was saying, it's often found in newborn animals because they get in through that umbilical area, which is awful. So that's a common presentation, you would say, Dad, correct?
Yeah, that's, I think, probably the most common presentation is in the navel of newborn animals.
This ranch is near La Pryor, roughly 50 miles inside the border. This is the first U.S. confirmation since eradication in the 1960s, aside from a localized outbreak in key deer in Florida in 2016 to 2017. As of June 9th, which is 2 days ago now, I believe this is the last case that's been announced as of today. Domestic animal cases in the U.S. have risen to 6, 4 cattle, 1 goat, and 1 dog. And these are all cases in Texas except for 1 in New Mexico. So that's where it stands. There's a lot of media coverage. This has gotten outside of the ag media world where it's lived for about 2 years now as people watch this crawl up through Central America into Mexico. I think most people who pay any attention knew this was coming, but the media, is my constant complaint with the media. They do not pay attention to rural America or certainly agriculture. But the words flesh-eating parasite during the Trump administration, that was too tempting to pass up, I guess. And they are all jumping on it and talking about how this is Trump's fault and it's related to some Doge cuts last year. All pretty silly if you know how this originated and what happened. So I'm going to ask my dad to give a little history of when we became aware that this had broken out of that buffer zone he talked about and the fact that it was eventually going to make it to Texas, which I imagine has been well discussed in the veterinary world as well as the ranching world for a while now.
Yeah, I just want to say too that it's pretty impressive in this country that we have so many experts from the Iran war that can quickly shift over to parasitology. Get to hear from everybody.
Aren't we blessed?
Yes.
They know more about the Strait of Hormuz than I knew was possible to know. But then they also have PhDs in parasitology. It's incredible.
It is. We're just so blessed in this country, yeah.
Yeah, screwworms aren't the only opportunists. So, this was a decades process to get rid of the New World screwworm from the United States and to push it down south. It was a process where year by year we were pushing it farther and farther south. We got it south of, our border, late 60s, and then continued to work to push it and eliminate it from Mexico, pushed it down through Central America and got it south of, what's called the Darien Gap, which is the bottleneck down there at Panama. So we were limiting it to South America. And then we were, there's a fly facility, a sterile fly facility there that is trying to protect that area. But, it got past that. So, it seems that it's related to the northern migration of people with their pets and animals, northward when the border was open, but it got past the Darien Gap, got into Central America and started crawling up. Once you get past that bottleneck, it's a lot harder to maintain it because it can spread out over a wider landmass and keep migrating farther and farther. And so that's what kind of happened. I think in 2022 was our first notice that it had crossed the Darien Gap, got into Mexico, I think in 2023. And then, when the Trump administration came in 2024, it was getting farther north in Mexico, and we were, aware of it and trying to stop it. When Rawlins came in, she did a lot to activate the forces to really gear up to stop it and eliminate it, and once again drive it back down south. Kind of redoing the job that we did in the past, but we weren't really geared up for it. We didn't have this, the sterile fly numbers. We had to implement some animal movement controls and try to slow it down and to stop it and to get ahead of it and then begin driving it back down. At the same time, we're trying to gear up the sterile fly program, which is going to be, the ultimate weapon to, just like we did once before, to drive it back down south. I think this time what I've heard is they might want to just try to completely eliminate it even from South America, which would be a big job, but that would be really great to do. But first things first, right now it's it's gotten to America. It's not established in America, but there are some pinpoint localized outbreaks.
That sterile fly program that we all as a country funded and implemented, we were able to also protect Mexico and Central American countries through that program and eradicate it from their herds as well. We partnered with them to keep it south of the Darien Gap. Some folks will say that Mexico hasn't been the best partner in that. Whether that's true or not, it worked for a long time until this, open border situation. And whatever you think about that, it had some consequences that maybe we didn't consider. Folks who are in media may not have even known what New World Screwworm was until they Googled it this week. So all that to say, it's frustrating to see the media talk about Rollins' approach and act as though she hasn't done enough. She was caught flat-footed. That's not true. She's been talking about it since before she was appointed, and she's been implementing a very aggressive approach to beat it back down out of Central America and Mexico ever since she took office. Experts predicted that it would be here by late or early 2025 at the latest. And she was able to delay that by a whole year by keeping the southern border closed to live animal imports for over a year now. Not a popular stance because we import 1 million cattle a year from Mexico. That has been completely stopped because of New World Screwworm since November of 2024. Under the Biden administration, they finally closed it. And it stayed closed. Rollins kept it closed. She opened it very briefly in the spring and I think for a week or so in July of last year. And since July, when some more cases were spotted in Mexico, she shut it back down again and it's been shut since. So almost a year. A tough stance to take. As we know, the American cattle herd is the smallest point it's been in 75 years. Beef prices are really high. President Trump's administration has kind of been at war within itself over what to do about beef prices. And Secretary Rollins has gone to bat for producers, even against some others in the administration, to discourage more imports and to protect the domestic ranching industry. So why did she take that stance to keep the border closed to live horse, bison, and cattle imports? And why was that so important for delaying this a year past projections?
We needed time to get our act in order to be able to deal with this, and that bought us a lot of time. And she is from Texas, and it's not. This isn't a wasn't a popular stance in Texas because Texas cattle feeders rely a lot on Mexican cattle imports, so that hurt Texas cattle feeders quite a bit. But she saw it as a necessary price to pay to stop this threat, and I think it is. But it's not easy if you're a Texas cattle feeder and your yard is empty, or you're having to buy domestic cattle at much higher prices. It's been good for cow-calf producers in the more northern states. It's kept cow-calf prices up, but it's a difficult thing. You got a lot of different interests in within the cattle industry. But it was necessary. It was needed. Like you say, she did open it momentarily, but then there was a case within 700 miles. It seemed necessary to not take the risk anymore. Anyway, all that said, yeah, I think she's done a great job of, really amping this approach up to get rid of the New World Screwworm. But it didn't go away overnight. It's not going to go away overnight now. It's not established like it was, so it'll be much, much easier. But we have to amp up, especially our sterile fly program, to begin to be able to move it on south once more. And yeah, ultimately, if they're able to eliminate it from South America, that makes things a lot easier, because then you don't have to, depend on all those Central American countries and Mexico, as partners. You can just get rid of it and eliminate the risk altogether.
I was talking to Shad Sullivan about this over at RCAF. It's frustrating to see the media lying about where this came from and really spinning it. As someone who covers stories about independent farmers and ranchers, Secretary Rollins has been extremely open to those stories and supportive. Most folks who pay attention will tell you she's probably the best advocate the smaller producers have had in a very long time. Would love to hear both your takes on that. You actually met her in DC on a similar case involving water supply for Northern California ranchers. So we all have a personal experience with how she's paid attention to these types of issues. But I just hate that she is being blamed for an outbreak that anyone paying attention in the cattle industry saw coming. She did all the right things from jump to get this addressed, but the media is still trying to blame her rather than what really caused this, which was Biden era policies. I just find it so dishonest and frustrating.
Yeah, it's very frustrating to go on X especially and see everybody, all the new experts suddenly talking about this, which you've been covering, before even the Trump administration. Brooke's been talking about before she even got put into USDA at her role now. So it's been an issue that we've known was coming and that she's taken steps to. So it's very frustrating to see everyone just pretend like it's suddenly happening now because of Trump and Brooke. So
Yeah, I would agree. And again, I think there are opportunists on both the left and the right. Any opportunity to criticize the Trump administration, people are going to jump on. No matter if it's true or not, if it can be phrased in a certain way, they're going to take that opportunity. So that's on the left. And on the right, there are those as well who, people these days, they want viewers, they want clicks, and they will take opportunities to criticize when it's really not justified. So, and I think over time, and we've talked about this, Keely, just with what you're doing, it's, I think you need to be honest and trustworthy and not seek clicks, right? You just need to tell the truth. And over time, people are going to, you're going to have a reputation and they're going to trust you. And that's the right approach. But not everybody's taking that approach on the left or on the right. So that's what we're dealing with, pure and simple. This is a challenge. It's a national challenge. I feel that Rollins has done a great job to put us in a position to win this battle. And I feel very confident that we will win this battle. And it's going to be, not in the news forever. It's going to be gone before you know it. And we will eventually get it pushed back south of the Darien Gap. But this is a reality, and we need to address it appropriately. And I feel like everything she has in place is what's necessary.
There's a whole contingent of people on X, on social media, including some prominent figures like Texas Agriculture Commissioner Sid Miller, who are making hay out of this situation, I believe, for their own political ends. I'm not going to name names right now, but there's some accounts that have been really loud about this and they go pretty viral. And the people behind those accounts, I know for a fact, are not honest brokers and they have some pretty sketchy history. I'm happy to criticize if it's warranted. I know you both are too. I wish this sterile fly facility could have been put online earlier, but I don't know how that could have been sped up any more than it was.
Yeah.
I mean, this is one of her first things she got done as ag commissioner or as ag
Right.
secretary, excuse me.
Right. I think it was fast tracked through the Army Corps of Engineers as a priority and got permits very, very quickly. I'm not very familiar with building sterile fly, facilities, right? And it does use radiation to sterilize these flies. So now you have that added, risk element. But it'd be nice if it could come on instantly, but that's just not reality. So I'm sure they're working on it as quickly as they can. The sooner, the better. That's going to really help because that's going to add to the arsenal. I think the existing fly facility in Panama can produce about 100 million sterile flies a week. They've also, since that time, brought back online a Mexican sterile fly facility to add more numbers. But this one is going to add like 300 million a week. When it gets up into production. And so that's going to really amplify how quickly we can get this thing back down south of Panama again.
The other point of contention you'll hear is some Doge cuts that happened last year. Do you know about that? And what can you say about those USAID cuts that happened under, I guess, Elon Musk during his tenure?
Yeah, well, that was some pretty bad stuff. Just a lot of fraud, an incredible amount of fraud and waste. This doesn't have anything to do with New World Screwworm and APHIS and USDA. From what I understand, the New World Screwworm people, within a very short period of time, there were like 12, a multiple of 12 times the number of full-time workers on that case. So they haven't gone down, they've gone up. So people saying, attributing to Doge cuts are simply, they didn't like Doge cuts, and they're finally finding some way they think they can criticize it. But this isn't it.
Yeah. For New World Screwworm alone, USDA and APHIS have broad authority under the Animal Health Protection Act to use contingency funding and emergency resources to respond to animal health threats. They've received roughly $1.3 billion in emergency funding over the last 18 months. And that investment resulted in 100 million sterile flies every week at that Panama facility, major surveillance and trapping operations along the border, tick riders, and all these different trapping and prevention and detection methods that you read about. That was amped up significantly, increased outreach and education in the US and Mexico, and increased staffing, as you mentioned, Dad. A year and a half ago, there were just 10 APHIS employees working full-time on New World Screwworm. Today, there are over 120. So that's 1,000% increase in 14 months, staffing on this specific issue. Then there's that completed New World Screwworm dispersal facility in Texas, not a production facility, but a dispersal facility to ramp up the spread of these sterile flies. Also, the New World Screwworm sterile fly production facility that will come online here shortly in Mexico. And then we did break ground on the big sterile fly facility in South Texas a few months ago. They've also launched a $100 million challenge to encourage research efforts to accelerate next generation tools and science to deal with New World Screwworm. So pretty robust lineup to address this threat. And again, that didn't happen when they detected this thing a week ago. That happened over the last 18 months. So all that to say, I think people shouldn't let the media freak them out. You should feel confident that the right steps are being taken. This didn't take anybody by surprise. But like you said, it's a serious thing and it's not something to be taken lightly. So why is the sterile fly release, why is that the best method that we can come up with, and how does it work? Can you talk about that?
Yeah. So, as a control method and a way to, rapidly drop the fly population, there's some unique things about the life cycle of the New World Screwworm. One of them is that the females breed only once. And so we can take advantage of that strategically. And so that's what this sterile fly protocol is all about. They produce sterile male flies, and then they release them to flood the zone where those screwworms might be. And the more they have, the better, because then the lower the likelihood that female fly is going to encounter another fertile male fly. So the more sterile ones you have, the less likelihood that she runs into a good one, and more likely she runs into a bad one. And then that ends the life cycle, and she lays eggs that don't become flies, and then she dies, and that's it. So the more numbers you can flood the zone with, the more the odds are that she's going to encounter a sterile fly, and then you're going to eliminate her and her life cycle. So, that was in use back in California in like the 70s and 80s. We had what's called the Mediterranean fruit fly, and it had the same life cycle. So that's what, ultimately brought that under control. The outbreaks we had was releasing sterile male flies. So this is the same type of thing. It worked before. This is how we drove it south. You get a line, you start flooding the zone, and you just push it down, 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 down. And, that's what we did. And that's what we're going to do again. That's going to be successful. It's just kind of a matter of time of ramping up our fly numbers and implementing that. So, but that's the approach.
Do you know the first time how long it took to eradicate them in the 60s?
Yeah, this started in the late 50s. And so, it took more than a decade. Well, I think it took about a decade to get it out of America. And the flies like the tropics better than the cold weather. So even at that point, it wasn't farther north than about the latitude of Oklahoma, Bakersfield, California, the southern states. So that's about as far as it ever got. So, the far north states shouldn't have a lot of concern about this. But it took a while for it to get it down below our southern border. And then it took another, decade or two to get it all the way down below Panama. But then you're dealing with, Mexico, and a lot of this, I just have to say, a big part of this is APHIS and animal movement controls, right? because you don't want animals moving inadvertently, taking it from an infected area to a clean area. So that's why, APHIS has different animal control protocols for shipment of livestock and other animals. There needs to be a border where animals are checked. And even from state to state, animals are checked. They have to maybe be identified. That's important for a lot of reasons. One of them is New World Screwworm, but there's other diseases that we deal with that APHIS, the Animal Plant Health Inspection Service, is working day and night to try and protect North American livestock and ranches and farms.
Sid Miller, who's the outbound ag commissioner in Texas, he has been hammering the USDA to deploy SWAS, which is a program that uses targeted bait to kill fertile adult screwworm flies before they can reproduce. So what would you say? Is that a good method that we should be using? Why isn't the USDA deploying that in Texas?
I think that it's a tool in the toolbox, but you use it in places where it's already been established to knock down the numbers and then to come in with the sterile fly program to completely eliminate it. It's not established in America yet. Right now, that would eliminate way more sterile flies that we'd be dispersing than it would be the wild pathogenic New World Screwworm flies. So that's just not an appropriate tool to be using right now. It might be useful to use, in Central America and areas in South America, but it's not something that should be used at this point in North America, where we're finding, just a handful of cases anywhere. The sterile fly program is going to be much, much more effective at just wiping those isolated little outbreaks out than trying to bait them. That's just not a good approach.
But if we don't, there's not any sterile flies being released yet, correct? And there won't be until next year? Is that the timeline?
No, there are sterile flies being released right now.
Oh, there are. Okay. It's just not fully operational.
So the Panama facility is producing 100 million. APHIS is determining where to release those, as most strategic and most effective. They're being released already in our Texas area and areas that are at risk. They've been for a while. So yeah, that's already been happening. These cases that got in kind of got past it a little bit.
100 million a week, right?
Yeah, 100 million a week from that facility, and then more from the New Mexico facility.
Right.
That's what we've been doing, and that's the right approach in my opinion. I'm from what I understand, and this is what seems to make sense. That's the right approach right now, not just baiting all the flies. Basically, it is going to make our sterile fly program ineffective.
And yeah, in addition to it killing sterile flies, it's also a probable carcinogen. So probably not the first tool you want to use, like you're saying.
Yeah, I think it has a role, but doesn't have a role in the United States right now.
Okay. Sid Miller also said this week he wouldn't want to report a case on his own place because his animals would be quarantined, which I think is a really irresponsible thing for an ag commissioner to say. What does it do to a containment effort when you have a leader saying something like that out loud, basically justifying anybody who might make that decision and could really set back efforts to contain this thing?
Yep. I think public trust of APHIS is important right now, because that's how, when a case appears, it can be dealt with quickly and eliminated. And if people don't trust it and don't report it, then it's going to be allowed to get more of a foothold than it otherwise would. So to do anything to suggest that people shouldn't report is very, very irresponsible. The initial case has been treated, because that's the situation. You can treat this and you get rid of the maggots and the animal's healthy, and it's not a carrier of it, and it can go on and be fine. You just need to deal with it promptly and stop it where it's at. So if you have a suspected case, you don't want to throw it in the trailer and drive it across, the county to go get it checked out. You want to have APHIS come to you, have them evaluate and take a look. You don't want to be spreading it throughout the county, and you definitely don't want to be keeping this secret in your own little place. That's not going to help. That's going to make the problem worse. It's just going to be able to amplify right there.
And Grace, you are a beginning rancher yourself. Some of the media, the way that they're framing this, they're acting like, beef could be at risk. That's kind of what they're implying, talking about food safety. What would you tell people who might be worried about food safety and New World Screwworm on the consumer side.
On the consumer side. Yeah, it's not an issue on the consumer side other than maybe prices will go up. That could be the worry. But yeah, you're not going to get any contaminated meat. This is only in live animals that it's going to be an issue.
Yep. And that also is relevant to another myth going around in the media blaming Trump for Argentinian beef imports. Again, people don't know what they're talking about because not only has the southern border been shut to all livestock crossings for about a year now, we do not bring live cattle from Argentina to the U.S. We bring boxed beef, and New World Screwworm does not spread through boxed beef. So that's another myth that's spreading faster than the screwworm right now. All right. How's that for a cheesy line? Okay. So if you're a rancher, what are you looking for on your property?
Yeah. You want to be mindful, especially, if you're near the border, right? Near the impacted areas. Keep an eye on your newborn calves, watch their navels, post-castration. You want to use fly repellent. You want to keep an eye on those animals. Any animal that's depressed, that's not eating, that's not getting up much, you want to check them out. These wounds tend to smell bad, just like a normal, blowfly maggot-infested wound does. They tend to have odor. They can be, like I say, in the different orifices. They can be between the legs. And you just want to check them out. And if you see something suspicious, then give APHIS a call. Give your vet a call, give APHIS a call, and there'll be people on your doorstep very quickly. But, it's not that complicated to treat. You can, treat it with, like ivermectin injectable, Dectomax injectable. That's going to be effective. Also, like Catron 4, which is a repellent that will kill the maggots, and they'll drop out. So you want to clean the wound, flush that out. You're probably going to want to give them a systemic antibiotic, but the main thing is to identify an area that has it, and make sure it doesn't spread more on your place. They're going to give you a lot of attention. You're going to be a very important person. You're not going to get blamed. They're going to stop it at your place. So you want their help.
Do typical fly prevention methods still apply?
Yeah. Yeah, typical fly prevention still applies. The problem, like when you castrate, you should, especially if you're doing it in warmer weather where there are flies present and potential, blowflies, it's good to put on a fly repellent. But these can get started even without a fresh wound, like we talked about on the navel and what have you. So yeah, maybe even, if you're catching your calves, if you're in an area or if it's on your place, wouldn't be a bad idea to spray some repellent. There are some drugs that now have been approved, repellents, insecticides for it in the United States, kind of as an emergency situation. So use those fly repellents. But the main thing is, kind of the old thing of just keeping an eye on your animals and identifying a problem quickly.
So if you call APHIS, you have a
Yeah.
suspected sighting, what will happen when they show up? What do you expect?
Yeah.
Like, what's this quarantine process that Sid Miller's saying you don't ever want to go through? What does that look like?
This is normal disease control. APHIS, Animal Health and Plant Inspection Service control methods, whether it's New World Screwworm or trichomoniasis or whatever disease you have that is a reportable disease that needs to be controlled. They put in appropriate protocols to control animal movement, number one, to make sure it doesn't spread to new areas, and then to test and treat and eliminate it from that area. So if you were to call APHIS to your place because you suspect it, they're going to come, they're going to send a technician who's going to, first of all, look at the animal, look at the wound, see if it's consistent with New World Screwworm. Primary screwworms look different than the secondary screwworms. So there's some morphologic, anatomic differences.
What do they look like?
They have these dark breathing tubes, these tracheal tubes out the back. They have like 3 of them, and that's unique to the primary screwworms. So they're probably going to take a look, and they're going to have a pretty good idea if it's New World Screwworm or not, just as they look at it right there. But they'll help you treat the wound. They'll probably want to look around and check out some other animals to see, if there's other diseased animals. They will then collect samples and send those off to Ames, Iowa, where they're going to be speciated and identified for certainty as to whether those are New World screwworms. They're going to put into some movement controls because, yeah, you don't want this getting to your neighbor or the next place, and that's APHIS's responsibility to control that. But those animals will be treated. They're going to release sterile flies there if that is found to be on your place, and they're going to get it under control quickly. And then within a prescribed period of time, those controls are going to be, removed when appropriate. This is the process. This is how, animal disease control works.
Okay. Yeah, I found Sid Miller's quote. So he said in a report by Red River Farm Network that if he found an infestation on his property, he'd be reluctant to report it. He said, quote, "I don't want to be quarantined. That means no cattle can move off my place. I can't sell my cattle. I can't ship them. I can't move pastures." Not accurate.
Yeah, so he shouldn't be in the animal disease control business, because that's what these are normal things that have to happen to protect your neighbors and to protect other states and to protect the industry as a whole. So to say that is just inflammatory and just grandstanding. There's no other word for that.
He lost his primary bid to Nate Sheets, who's now running for Texas Ag Commissioner. And Nate Sheets has been working with Secretary Rollins since this news came out and supporting her response. Okay.
Yeah. I mean, this guy doesn't, that's just irresponsible talk. And this guy's not mature enough to be in that position.
That's an important role right now. Okay, so we've talked about what New World Screwworm looks like. We've talked a little bit about treatment. Anything more you want to say about treatment and what medicines people should have on hand? You listed, I think, 3. Are they all over the counter?
Yeah, well, yeah, I think so. It depends on your state. So those dewormers are, Catron 4 is, at least in California. I think it is in Texas as well.
If
And
it's
there's some
free
other,
in California, I bet it's available in Texas.
That'll be
right. Yeah, there are some other things that are available that have insecticides and repellents and antibiotics. There's a product called F10 antiseptic wound spray with insecticide that's authorized for use in this. There's also an F10 barrier ointment. There's a product called Negusint powder. So it's a powder that you can apply. And all these, again, they have an insecticide that'll kill the maggots. They have repellents that'll keep the flies away. Sometimes they have antibiotics that are mixed with them for wound care. Typically, you want to get rid of the maggots. You don't want to spread them. You probably would give a systemic antibiotic. You'd apply a fly repellent so they don't come back. And that's the end of it.
just on a practical note. If you're cleaning, I'm sure you want to wear gloves because this does go to people as well. Is that?
Yeah,
Sure.
yeah, it does. You probably want to wear, because if you're dealing with the wound, that has live maggots, there might also be immature or pupated eggs or unhatched eggs. And if you got those on your hands and you picked your nose back to, right, or something.
Who would do that?
Yeah, you could implant one of those in the wrong place. So yeah, you'd probably
I don't
want
want
to.
to do that.
I think, again, just dealing with, animals, right? You want to practice good hygiene, right? So.
Okay, fair enough.
Absolutely, especially with a consequence like that.
I think we've painted a vivid picture for
Yes.
folks. So moving on.
Whatever you do, don't clean out the maggots and then pick your nose. That would be the thing not to do.
If you remember anything from this podcast. Okay, so I think we've covered most of it. Treatment, what it looks like, how it got here. And one thing we didn't mention on how it got here is the cattle trafficking and organized crime moving back and forth across Central American borders and into the United States. So just a lot of reasons that policy has trickle-down effects, something to consider. That's absolutely part of this. Cattle trafficking has been a problem. And, like you said, APHIS plays an important role, but when APHIS doesn't even know what's coming across our border, it's hard enough because wildlife can carry this, and there's not really a great way to stop deer and coyotes and so on from crossing our gigantic border with Mexico. So it's already something it's very difficult to contain, even if you are stopping all livestock imports. Yeah.
Yeah, and like the case you talked about, I think 2017 in Florida, that got into the white-tailed deer population on those Florida Keys Islands. Fortunately, it was separated from the mainland, And with sterile flies, we're able to eliminate it. But yeah, this thing doesn't need cattle or sheep to propagate.
So, Grace, you mentioned beef prices for consumers. Do you think this will, it's a kind of a big question, but, theoretically, do you think this could make beef prices even higher for families in the next year or so?
Well, yeah, it's hard to say, obviously, but we're kind of expecting cattle prices to go up. So, of course, there's going to be a trickle down effect in the grocery store. So, I would assume that this might raise it a little bit, but I'm not sure, obviously, if that'll be substantial or not. I'm the internet expert here myself now.
Well, we're all just guessing, really. But, we could have a whole episode sometime about the beef prices and what's been going on. I do think sometimes I bristle a little bit when I hear people talking about beef prices because what do you value, and how expensive is beef really when you consider all that goes into it and its nutrition? We spend how much on, Snickers per pound or,
Right. Yeah.
Fritos per pound.
We just have an
beef to be dirt
expectation that,
cheap.
right, this nutrient dense protein source that's raised on American soil by American ranchers should be cheaper than Doritos for some reason.
Right, exactly. And of course, we want to keep things affordable, but maybe it's worth the sacrifice if you know that you're supporting ranchers, which would be an argument to buy local. As always comes back to that. If you can buy local from someone like Grace, do it. All right. Anything else we want to cover? Anything we missed? One question I got a few times is how far north this thing is expected to spread. You kind of touched on that, basically the latitude of Bakersfield.
Yeah, Oklahoma. That's how far it got before.
I think we've covered most of it. Be careful what you hear on social media. Fact check what we're saying. We're just another source of information, but there's some people who have ulterior motives, and I think that it's really it's not right of them to use this moment to grandstand because there's some pretty big repercussions for ranchers and scaring the industry, scaring people who don't read past the headline off of eating beef, scaring cattle markets is unfair to people who do this work every single day and they don't make their living on the internet.
Yeah, ever since COVID, there's kind of virtue in questioning the experts and pushing back on all of that. And of course, there's reason for that. But in this case, like you're saying, a lot of it's just fear mongering, and the people in charge so far are doing everything the right way as far as, and of course, keep tabs on that. But yeah, no reason to panic yet.
Yeah. And just one comment I would make too is I don't know if beef prices will go up so much as that they won't come down probably, because the border's been closed for more than a year now, pretty much. And I think that's a part of why prices are higher. Just we don't have the Mexican imports. So that means it's going to stay that way for a while. So I would suspect prices aren't going to go down. They might go up, but they're not going to go down, I don't think, for a while.
Yeah. Okay. And I know we would love for that to happen, or the administration would love for that to happen. But again, cleaning up some stuff that has been going on for a few years now. And that's going to be a process. But what do you think a year from now? Where do you think we'll be on this if you had to hazard a guess?
Well, yeah. So from what I understand, that Texas fly facility is going to come on board, right, I think at the beginning of 2027. These flies, like flies everywhere, are kind of seasonal, right? When it gets cold, the fly population goes down a lot. As it gets warmer, they come up. So coming off of winter, those fly numbers are going to be low. And hopefully we'll have the facility in line at that point to really hit it hard with the sterile flies and to, wipe it out and start pushing it south into Mexico and, farther down into Mexico next year. But, I think we're going to be seeing some of these little spikes here this summer, I would suspect. And I think things look really good for 2027.
Good deal. All right. So we always end these episodes with two questions. We debunk a myth about the livestock industry in the U.S., and then we get a ranch vet story from Dr. Brazil. So what's a myth we can debunk today from everything we've talked about in the current New World Screwworm case? Have you thought of one for us?
Well, it might really speak to just the animal surveillance that, normal ranchers, just the care that they give their animals. I mean, this thing isn't very common, hadn't been seen before but this rancher was looking at his calves close enough to see the very first case and find it on the navel of a newborn calf. I'm sure that's not his only newborn calf. So he's probably looking at all of them, and he's not the only one. But paying close enough attention to them to find that at an early stage, I think speaks well of just the care people provide for their animals in general.
That's a great point. Yeah, definitely not just absent ranchers. They're very involved, and which is the case most of the time. So yeah.
Not the factory farm image that they try to put on the
Yeah,
beef
exactly.
industry at all. Yeah. All right, you got a ranch vet story for us? Like Grace said last time, if we've heard it before, we'll pretend we haven't.
Yes.
You've heard them all, probably. Well, I remember, you come across some great people, right? And most of the stories are just with people and situations. And so actually this picture here, this is a rancher that I started working with when I was like 25, came out of vet school, and been working with ever since, still work with him all the time. And used to go there, work cattle quite frequently. And this guy's
That's
name
Mr. John Ford. Grace and
John
I
Ford.
both know who that is
He's
very
a
well.
legend. Yes, he's a legend.
Recognize him from here.
Yes.
Yep. That big white hat.
Yes. And so I would go there, and his wife Charlene is just super sweet and super wonderful. She was a school teacher. During the summers when I'd work there, if I happened to be working there, she would always invite me there for lunch, invite all the cowboys and everyone to come in for lunch. And she just put out a great lunch, and it was just wonderful. And there were a couple of cowboys there, and these are the best cowboys I ever knew. And one of them was a woman, Billy Drury, Dan and Billy, and they were in their 70s, and they worked cattle every single day for decades and decades and decades. But just down to earth people, tell it like it is. So they were there, and but when Charlene would go to school, then there was another guy who lived there that John, took care of kind of, and he had a house. He's an older man there, and he would make us lunch. Well, I got lunch there a few times, and very nice old guy, but he was in his 90s, somewhere fairly deep in his 90s. And he forgot, to clean his plates and, to do his dishes, and you got a bowl of something, and it might have been on the stove for half a week and heated and cooked and eaten several times. And so it was a bit of an adventure to go there for lunch. So one time, we finished working, it was getting close to noon, and Billy Drury, she says, "Hey, you want to stick around for lunch?" And I'm in my mind thinking, wait a minute, what month is this, right? And it's in the fall. Charlene's at school. It's like, well, I got some calls I gotta go to. And Billy looked me square in the eye, just point, blank face, and she just said, "Coward." Read me like a book, and that was funny. And she was like that. There was so much life in that gal. But that was a funny incident where she just looked right through me. She read my mind. So
She was an icon.
yes.
Went to her house one time with you, and she was older then, obviously. I think she had maybe broken her hip, and she had a revolver on the armchair by her and a shotgun in the corner.
Yes.
Nobody was
Yes.
going to mess with Billy.
Yeah, live in that cabin up in the mountains there by Rodeo Valley. Yeah,
Yes. Yep.
something. Good people. Knew more than most anybody, and just so very capable. Lots of stories about them. They were good people. They're passed away
Yeah.
by now, but yeah.
I like that. A nice ending to our intense topic today.
Flesh-eating
Thank you guys.
parasite conversation.
Exactly. Thank you guys for joining us. And you can find Dr. Brazil DVM on Instagram, where I'm usually posting for him, but he's got lots of good information there. Grace, where can people find you?
I don't really have anything. So
Grace is an anti-social media gal. She does have an Instagram. We'll see if she lets you follow her. Grace_Brazil, right?
that's
Do I have it
right.
memorized? All right, there you go. I blew up her spot. And you can find all of us at Ranch Vision, which is the software that helps ranchers plan their profits and strategize for business growth. We have 2 calls a month that you can join with Dr. Brazil. One is an onboarding to help you learn how to use the program. The other is a strategy call where you can meet with other ranchers from all over the world. We are launching a new opportunity to try it out on a demo basis. That's going to be live here soon. So if you've wanted to try Ranch Vision for a while, haven't pulled the trigger, now is a great time. You can set up a subscription and try it out for free and meet with us in one of those onboarding calls to learn about it and see how it works for your ranch operation. So visit us at ranchvision.io to learn more about that. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you, guys.
Thanks.
Bye.
Bye-bye.